So normally I'd start by introducing a little bit about the game and about the poor developers I'm about to interrogate, but in this case I think it's probably best if it comes from you. So in your own words, who are you and what on earth is Three Monkeys?
Cool. So my name's Steve, and I'm sat here with Rob. I'm the producer on the game Three Monkeys. We both work at Incus Games, and basically we specialise in audio-only games. So we try and sort of take away from the visuals, to be honest, and focus more on audio narratives. And we build immersive worlds for you to explore. And
so Three Monkeys is completely without visuals then?
It's got some conceptual artwork, but you don't really use it for any information. So, I mean, a lot of people like to play it with their eyes shut. So I guess technically you could say yes, it's got no visuals.
And what kind of world are you building? Is it something open? Are we talking combat, platforming? What have you got?
Everything is built in a 3D space. So it essentially works as a kind of first-person RPG. There's combat, there's exploration, it's kind of semi-open world sections, but we've kind of come up with some audio techniques that make it so it's navigable without actually needing to see maps or anything like that.
You've adapted to a world without light, honing your other senses and discovering others that lay dormant to the rest of us. You will be the saviour of Byzantia. Not without my help, of course.
Why Three Monkeys? I mean, for a first-time developer, I mean, this is Incus's first independent project, isn't it? Yeah. So for a first-time developer, it isn't really what I call playing it safe. Why not make a nice pixel art platformer and just leave it at that?
Oh, but there's far too much fun to be had in life, I think. I think, funnily enough, myself and Rob come from quite experimental music backgrounds, so we like to mess around with things that way. And actually, the weird thing is, on some sides of things, you could sort of say we're not playing it safe, but on the other side of things, we're actually exploring something that hasn't been explored that much. So actually, you've got a lot more to say, more obvious things to say, I guess. So in a way, yeah, it's more difficult, but I think actually there are people crying out for it as well. You know, there's the visually impaired community are really looking for more games that are sort of ambitious and pushing the boundaries. So you've kind of, I can't remember which developer said, but if we only built games for visually impaired, there'd already be a massive market because they're big gamers, you know. So to be honest, I actually feel like we're not playing it too. We're not being too risky, actually.
No, I think as well, within the team, everyone is interested in game audio, and that's something that was key in who we brought together around the project, but also the focus of the project. Myself and Steve are kind of audio guys, but then the other half of the team are always people who comment on the audio in games as well, which has obviously made that whole process quite a lot easier.
So you mentioned like you've worked quite closely with the visually impaired community. You've always had some of that in mind, but did you set out specifically to make a game for that community?
No, not at all, actually. I think we started out because we were audio guys. We just
yeah, I mean,
well, this is it. Well, this was the thing, and we sort of found, actually, firstly, we're always interested to find new ways that we can inform the player through better audio use. But the second side of it was we just had some ideas. I mean, actually, myself and Rob a few years ago were fresh out of uni, sort of post-grad courses, and we'd been researching audio in games for quite a long time. And actually, we just started to come up with a few ideas, which actually got us thinking, you know what, there's actually scope for just using audio to inform the player. But it was also to do, we did have a few friends who were sort of visually impaired, and I think I've probably mentioned it before, but there was a particular meeting in London. It was on the busiest Saturday before Christmas, and I met Kevin, our friend who's helping us with the game. Yeah. And he had actually navigated his way across the underground to get to us on that day, on the busiest day of the year. And we just sort of had these conversations, like sort of, he said, of course, a fireball is orange. And I said, well, how do you know it's orange? And he said, well, you're right. I kind of imagine a whooshing sound and the heat sensation, which was amazing. And then we were going down the escalators as well, but it was broken. And he said, well, that's interesting because the third one escalator along is still working, the one that's still going up. Which was crazy. So it just gets you thinking, you know, I think we get so used to using our eyes that actually we just don't use our ears in as much detail, but they can do a lot. So That's where.
For him, then you might almost expect the game to be easy. Like, how have the different groups, the visually impaired and the sighted, like responded in playtesting?
Well,
yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Kevin's been really great in the sense that he's kind of come on board as a consultant. So we've been getting him to play the various demos that we've done kind of on a regular basis. And sort of we'll sit down and it'll take quite a while to kind of get through because we're not quite sure, and then he'll sit down and do it in 5 minutes. And we're just and we're kind of, so that one of the things that we kind of learned to address really early on is getting this balance between in terms of difficulty for sighted people to actually not throw them in a really harsh environment, but equally to make it challenging enough for visually impaired people to find it interesting and can actually engage with it.
We're trying to push people's perceptions of what they can achieve by just using their ears, and by also, this is done by not having a very step-by-step guide of the game, but by allowing people to interact with the game straight away and be able to learn as they go along.
I mean, I obviously tried to build when I met you at Eurogamer Expo. And you do adapt to it like quite fast, but for the first 10 minutes or so, I was basically key mashing. It really is a new sensation entirely. But I have to admit that, to my shame, I had never heard of the audio-only genre before I played Three Monkeys at Eurogamer, and I suspect quite a lot of gamers will probably be in the same position. So how are you planning to appeal to them beyond just the novelty factor?
Well, this is the funny. I think you're completely right, and I don't think it's shameful. I think it's just a question of two communities kind of actually are quite separated. Actually, I think there's a big community at audiogames.net where there's a few audio games sort of already out there, sort of zombie games and things like that. There's one called Swap.
There's always a zombie game.
Yeah, oh, of course, yeah.
There's a lot of blind programmers that actually make games for that website as well, which is pretty impressive. Yeah.
So it's actually, I think the main thing is there's been quite a few audio ideas floating around for quite a while, but actually it's, I think the size of this project is what kind of pushes things on a bit, and also taking the fear element out. You know, we want the player to feel in control. But back to your question, I think we're sort of trying to bridge, we almost want to create something where blind or visually impaired gamers can play with visual gamers too, because it would just be amazing to bridge that gap eventually so that it's just a bit more accessible.
But out of the darkness shines a light! True, it's metaphorical bollocks, not a literal light, but it, or more appropriately, will bring us out of this eternal night and break the curse.
So you're aiming for an end of 2014 release, but obviously Three Monkeys is a somewhat unique game. So how are you planning to get it out there? Will something like Steam Greenlight do it justice?
It's a good question, actually. It's something we thought about quite a lot. We've actually got a few meetings coming up specifically about distribution. But it's interesting that from the visually impaired community, we got feedback that actually Steam is quite hard for the visually impaired community to navigate. To be honest, we don't want to shut doors too early. I think it's a case of making sure it's as widely distributed as possible. So I think something we've talked about as a team, we're quite keen to self-distribute as well. So we'll be looking at a way to do that as well. But certainly I think quite a few of the usual avenues like Steam, we will be looking into that. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, we're still planning how we're going to distribute it, but there's actually a few other things on the cards that I don't think we can talk about too much.
There's no one solution this time.
No, there is. I mean, there's quite a cool thing that might be in the pipeline for. We'll leave it at that.
Oh, so curious. Well, until that distant time then, how can we keep an eye on Incus Games and the team?
Great.
Yeah, we've got a website which is just incusgames.com, which we update with all the news. Whenever there's some dev going on, we try and update with stuff that we're doing. A lot of the sound design stuff goes up there because there's always funny pictures to be taken of us cutting up melons and stuff like that, which is quite fun.
Exactly.
Then obviously we've got the Twitter, which is just at Incus Games, and specifically for Three Monkeys at Enter Byzantia, which is the name of the world that the game is set in. And basically all of our news is going up through there at the moment.
Well, brilliant. Rob and Stephen, thank you very much for talking to me, and best of luck with the game.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us on.